Okay, so we'll start off. So just want to say howdy. Snatchatya notice Ian Jan Kadasta, Todd Alec Lasuzi, Nakazi Sehazia. Just want to say good evening. I'm Todd Alec. I'm originally from Nakasley and a family doctor here. Really want to welcome you to this webinar for Allyship and Understanding, Interrupting Indigenous-Specific Racism in Healthcare. So we're very fortunate to be joined by a group of panel experts who will be introduced shortly and educate us on this topic and answer your questions. So maybe next slide, please. First, we'd like to acknowledge that we, UBC CPD, work on the traditional ancestral and unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I would also recognize that all you are joining us this evening from many different places, and we encourage you to reflect on the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands on which you are situated. And I apologize, I have another screen here. And I'm currently actually away right now, and I'm on speaking to you from the Asaland and later the Huichol people in near Port of Vallarta, and really happy to help moderate this event today. Next slide. Now to start us off in a good way, I had the pleasure to introduce Victor Guerin, one of our elders that does some great work. So really appreciate him coming in at short notice to help support us here.
Tana kone si yemsiye ai kone skwalawin konzi kotsnala tana kone si Satan itelum nus elam at samastal ni wami at antha nitsen amhyasam atana tamuch at shwathathikat I huinem te spaltens at schwalekwa wa halitel I atana tamuch na schwalekwa at stapelkan you shaslakwa te swale na schwalekwa at hathan hin imech at tamuch was ste at snimas na schwalekwa at atman you Chtem at Shalata is still tatlo I. Dear friends and relatives, as you've heard, my English name is Victor Guerin. My ancestral name is xʷməthkվəy. I hail from the Musqueam First Nation. We're gathered here on our ancestral territory and on the ancestral territories of many of our friends this evening, and it gives me a good feeling in my heart to see all of you here. I'd like to start things this evening by sharing a song of greeting. It's a song that came to me when walking in the woods here in our ancestral territory and listening to the voices of our brethren who share this home with us, our feathered brethren who fly in the skies above us, the four-leggeds who walk the earth as we do, and our fin brethren who swim in the lakes, rivers, and ocean that surround us. Thank you, dear friends and relatives. I now turn the floor back.
Thank you much, Dr. Guerin. I really appreciate us starting us in a good way, talking about this here and really appreciate all that you do. So thank you so much for this, and it sometimes can be heavy, and I think really doing it this way and really appreciate you adapting to this virtual environment. I know that everyone's adapted this post-COVID world, so appreciate you coming in this way virtually to start us off here. So thank you again.
Oh, see ya.
So we'd like to thank the Doctors of BC's Indigenous-Specific Anti-Racism, ISAR, and the Cultural Safety Team. With the support of the JCCs, we have collaborated with the UBC CPD to support the educational development of this webinar series. So this is a 90-minute webinar. There's some opportunities in tonight's webinar to ask questions. We had asked that you use slido.com to receive your questions. You can access by scanning this QR code here or going to slido.com and entering the event code Allyship, ALLYSHIP. Or you can use the direct link, including your email invitation to the webinar. We will try, but may not be able to answer all the questions in the allocated time of this webinar. Please upvote questions suggested by others to increase the chance of having them answered tonight. If you're having any technical difficulties, please note that this webinar will be recorded and sent to you together with a link to any resources that were mentioned this evening. At the end of the session, please remember to take a few moments to complete the attendance and the evaluation forms. You can access these forms via the email you received for the session. In order for participating physicians to obtain study credits, you must complete the online attendance form. The learning objectives are: please describe the impact of Indigenous-specific racism in healthcare and the role of healthcare professionals in addressing these systemic issues, identifying actionable steps for interrupting racism and fostering respectful, inclusive interactions with Indigenous patients, reflect on personal positionality, and develop a deeper commitment to allyship, incorporating lessons from panel into practice. There are no disclosures, and from the planning team and from the moderators and speakers. And so I thought I would just give a quick overview of what allyship and understanding is to start the process. So it's an active, consistent, and arduous practice of unlearning and reevaluating in which a person in a power position of privilege and power seeks to operate in solidarity with a marginalized group. And I use the BC's anti-oppressive network because they have some comprehensive things that will be put on the link below. And I thought that was a good starting point to kind of really talk about this. Allyship is not an identity. It's a lifelong process of building relationships based on trust, consistency, and accountability with marginalized individuals and or groups of people. It is not self-defined. Our work and our effort must be recognized by the people we seek to allies ourselves with. So really grateful to have these four amazing speakers that are going to talk about their journey and their allyship journey of the work that they're doing with Indigenous people. Allyship for me is to, sorry. Okay, sorry. Well, maybe we'll keep going. Allyship is important to be intentional in how we frame the work we do. Examples: we are showing support for, We are showing our commitment to ending a system of oppression by, we are using our privilege to help by. Next slide, please. Responsibilities. Actively acknowledge and openly discuss our privilege and power. Listen more and speak less. Work with integrity and direct communication. Do not expect to be educated by others. Build own capacity to receive criticism. Embrace the emotions that come out of the process of allyship. Recognize that our needs are secondary to the people we seek to work with. Do not expect awards or special recognitions. So we do have some responsibilities as allies. Next slide, please. Roles in allyship and understanding. Act out of genuine interest in challenging larger oppressive power structures. Support and make use of our privilege and power for the people we seek to work with. Turn the spotlight we are given away from ourselves and towards the voices of those who are continuously marginalized, silenced, and ignored. We give credit where credit is due. Engage people with whom we share identity and privilege in conversations about oppression experienced by those we seek to work with. Personally, and then practice. Oh, sorry. Next slide, please. Practicing allyship. So here are some tools or thoughts that we can do. So how much space are we taking up in the conversation, in rooms, in our organization, particularly talking about other groups? How do we actively improve access to our meetings for our other individuals, our actions? How are our identities taking up space physically and verbally? How much do we know about the people we seek to work with? What are our assumptions and from where do they originate? Who are we leaving behind? So who is not included in the meeting or the advocacy tables that need to be included in those work? So from that, personally, I think we're all in our journey, and I think it's a lifelong journey of reflecting. An example we could use personally for myself as a cis male, would consider myself a feminist, and sometimes may have some power of authority, and really need to advocate and ensure that there is good representation of our female sisters in medicine and to have the advocacy to be able to speak their voices and support some of the movement. That might be kind of an example that I could personally use. And so, would consider myself a feminist and some type of on the spectrum of support and have to really work on that in that process. Hoping these slides can kind of give a bit of a frame of that process. And now, without any further ado, we're gonna change to our lovely panelists who do some incredible work and really talk about their story of why they are allies and do some amazing work. And hopefully that can help inspire others to start this work or continue to do this work. So for the next person I would like to introduce is Dr. Daisy Dulay. And I apologize. I think the introduction slide has already been on the thing, so I've been told straight to give it right to you, Dr. Dulay. Please.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Todd, for that grounding. Well, actually, Elder Victor for the grounding, and then introducing us to the terms of allyship. Before I begin, I'd like to say I'm calling in from the lands of the Musqueams soil tooth story. I do have a bit of a speech impediment, but in the Squamish lands, but I originally reside with my family on the lands of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations, which is also known as Victoria. I'm honored to be here today, and this journey really started, years ago, before I didn't even realize it, before I understood what it meant to work on work on truth and reconciliation. It was in a situation that was a clinical care setting, and I was taking care of an elder in the hospital who was dying. The room wasn't great. It was small, tucked away. And there was a lot of pressure as the consultant to ask the family if they would consider moving to a better room. And part of it was because there was a lot of family coming. And to me, that felt very uncomfortable to be trying to do something like that or ask the family to do that in a time of sorrow. And it took a lot of effort for me to think about what is the right thing to do. And what I realized is that I really needed to listen to why they wanted to be there. And what I understood was they wanted to be together in that room because that's where they felt safe. And that's what mattered. And it reminded me, and it took me back to my own grandmother, my BB, who was dying. And we similarly, there was a large family coming together, and the feeling of how we were treated at that time never was lost on me. And so I remember that experience, and I could feel that similar feeling when I was getting the pressure of trying to move the patient and their family to as I said, a better room. But at the same time, what I learned was that this is where their safe space was. And after the elder had passed away, one of his siblings had embraced me. And that really meant a lot. And that really taught me a lot. It was in terms of, it was what I considered actually patient-centered care. But I realized in the moment that it was just showing up, listening, and trying to make space, even when the system was pushing back. So, yeah, I think that was my earliest journey towards this, and I still think of this journey as Todd, you've mentioned, it's a lifelong journey. It's not a goal. It's a value, and I continue to learn. And more recently, one of the challenges that I have experienced is when doing this work, it's difficult. There's a complexity. Being a racialized settler, I'm a second generation unwelcomed South Asian settler. My family has been impacted by colonization, but we've also we've benefited from immigration. So there's a tension with that too. So when there are things that come up, it's there is a double bind situation sometimes, because if I stay silent, then I'm complicit. Speaking up sometimes as a person of color can sometimes be also unsafe, but it is taking that courage. And so it's something that I have to remind myself that, yes, there is an additional burden for those who walk this path who are not Indigenous, but of other marginalized communities, that we also have to navigate that piece, but also support our Indigenous brothers and sisters and try to show up and continue to educate others and advocate for cultural safe care, for example. And the other thing is that silence can cause harm. And so, but at the same time, we also know that if we need to also take care of ourselves when we're doing this work. So taking the rest and then trying to recognize that we may not always be perfect, but the important piece is showing up. Another story that made me think about this, the journey that I'm on, is what I've learned from my patients. One more recently was just how much I've learned about Indigenous cultures because of the opportunities that I've had to connect and work with Dr. Todd, as well as Dr. John, who is here today, as well as Dr. Marilyn. But what I've learned is that how beautiful Indigenous communities are in terms of the importance of connection, ceremony, and community, and how that shows up as actually medicine in two-eyed approaches. And more recently, I gave a talk at a Indigenous Women's Heart Health Conference. I got to say, I was pretty nervous because I didn't want to say something wrong. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I always want to get it right. And instead of focusing on the negatives, which we tend to do in cardiology and talking about cardiac risk factors or heart health risk factors, what we did was spin it around and saying, what were the positive factors? So again, the fact that connection, ceremony, and community are considered medicine. In terms of resources that have helped me through the journey, I continue to, as I said, learn, but I really enjoyed the Doctors of BC Indigenous Cultural Safety webinars, as well as the experiential Longhouse sessions that they have done. So I encourage those who haven't done that to take a look at the webinars. They have been they are recorded. And if you get the opportunity to go to the Longhouse experience, please do. It is life-changing. And families are welcome. I brought my own kids and my husband to it too. I try to read books to understand more. So books by Tanya Talanga, Jody Wilson-Raybould, and Richard Wagamese, who really helped me understand more. And Richard Wagamese provides so much wisdom and gentleness. And the last one that really touched me most was, or more recently, was The Sugar Cane, which was an Emmy-nominated film. And it was about residential school. It was hard to watch, but you know, these stories aren't easy, but we need to witness them. And one of the things that a gift has been in this journey is that it's allowed me to connect with my own culture. I realized how much I've been assimilated to fit in, and this path has helped me to try to find more about where I came from. And terms of just looking at the time here, 2 more minutes. Okay. In terms of actionable steps, it's really to start small. And you don't have to figure it out all at once. It's okay. You know, fear is, you know, I still get worried if I do something wrong, but again, trying is so much more important, and being willing to be curious and just listening without trying to fix. Just going back to the stay curious, one of the things that there was a missed opportunity several years back, again, before my journey. A patient had once told me about the Moose Hide campaign, which is tomorrow, and it's a movement to end violence against women and Indigenous women and children. And he wanted to connect on this because he knew I was South Asian, and domestic violence is also prevalent in our culture, our community as well. And I totally missed it. I was totally focused on cardiology, and that was it. And now looking back, he was trying to teach me. And so, yeah, I think the last bit of tips in terms of steps would be, you know, there's a lot of work happening around Indigenous-led work, and it's, you know, taking the step to get involved, support it, engage with it, and learn from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dulay. She does some incredible work with us at Garrison. She's one of our cardiologists and does some work on the RTVS and just really appreciate you spending some time here to talk about some of the incredible work you do. So thank you so much for that. Next speaker, we have Dr. Dana Hubler. And so really have a pleasure again to have this great four-person team that's just want to really talk about. So she's a settler born in the traditional territory of the Tsimshian people and family lands of the Comox Nation. Works as family docs with FNHA and practice improvement for the UBC Rural CPD medical director, as well as the faculty development co-lead for the RTVS and physician advisor with the Island Health Physician Quality Improvement Program.
Thank you so much, Todd, and thanks, Elder Victor, for the song and grounding us in the water and the air and the land. And thanks, Dr. Daisy, for leading us off. And I have so much respect for you and really honored to be here alongside you. So my name's Dana Hubler, and I'm a mom to Sophie and Marilyn, and I'm a partner to Tim, and I'm a daughter and a sister, and I'm a family doctor, and I'm a gardener this time of year, and I'm a friend. And as Todd said, I was born in the Prince Rupert Hospital in Tsimshian Territory to Dan Hubler, who has Swiss and French ancestry, and to Sandy Peterson Hubler, who has Danish and English ancestry. And so I now live with my family and work in the Comox, the territory of the Comox First Nation, and they have just ratified the signing of a modern day treaty. And so still trying to understand what that means and how best to support that as a settler on these lands. So like many of you, I grew up learning that Canada was a mosaic, and it didn't matter where you're from. Everybody was a Canadian, and we all had a seat at the table. And that we were peacekeepers and pioneers and proud Canadians with a proud history and an honorable place in the world. And we all walked around proudly sporting Canadian flags on our backpacks because everyone loved Canadians. So that's what I knew, because those were the stories that I had been told through education and through the media and through my family. And so we're here today because some of our Indigenous colleagues have tapped us on the shoulders to attend tonight, because they've named us as allies. And what that tells me is that there have been some moments they have witnessed me or experienced me as an ally. And I'm really pleased to hear that, that there have been those moments, because that is the place I want to stand. And I do believe that othering is the great challenge of our time. And I truly want to be a part of systems and thinking that divide us and contribute to ongoing suffering. But I know that as much as I've always strived to be one of the good guys, like many of us who land in helping professions, I've also had moments where I was not an ally because I could not see or understand the power dynamics at play. I didn't hear the hurtful comments made, or I didn't see the policies in place that kept us divided. And so why is it that as a well-meaning person, I can cause hurt or perpetuate harm or uphold racist policies and not be an ally? And so I think when we consider allyship and what that means, a lot of it comes down to having the courage and humility to look at what privileges I hold in this current society, how I got those privileges, and at whose expense I hold those privileges. So for me, going back to those stories, the ones that I was told at school and in pop culture and at the dinner table, I need to figure out whose stories those were and whose stories those were not. So does Canada have an honorable history? And are we a mosaic of cultures with equal seats at the table for everyone? And it turns out that's not the case. And because of my privilege and the education I received, I only figured that out a lot later in my life. And I have regrets about that. The first term I heard the term genocide used regarding Canada and Indigenous nations, I had a reaction to it because I thought genocide happened in other places in the world and at other times in history, that it happened during the Holocaust and in Rwanda, but not here. But as I started to learn more and unlearn even more, I realized the stories I'd been told growing up were incorrect and in many cases were lies. And as some of you may have seen in the recent election and in your community and the media, denialism of residential schools and genocide are arising. And so part of it really has been digging into it. And so I want to tell you, the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the crime of genocide defines genocide as any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. 1, killing members of the group. 2, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of a group. 3, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction in whole or in part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Or 5, forcibly transferring children of the other group. So when we think about forced sterilization, residential schools, 60 scoop, 7% of children in Canada are Indigenous, but 54% of our foster care system are Indigenous kids. That's genocide. And so when we start to read the actual documents from our Canadian history, like the Doctrine of Discovery that underpins a lot of our current law and the current language of the India Act, if you read the Indian Act, the table of contents includes lines, subjects like what to do with mentally incompetent Indians, and what to do with possession of lands and reserves, and how to deal with surrenders and designations. Like, this is our current law. And so I think we really need to start to reconcile what we know to be true and what the truth is. And part of that reconciliation also had to be personal. So how did my ancestors come to arrive in a land and behave so horribly or turn a blind eye to these atrocities? And that led me to really dig into who my people actually are. And it turns out my Swiss ancestors were actually French Huguenots who fled to Switzerland to escape persecution from the Catholic Church. And that led me to start to understand trauma and how hurt people can go on to hurt other people unless we pause to heal and learn and unlearn. So for me, allyship has meant committing to a lifelong journey of showing up, learning, unlearning, self-reflection. It's meant looking at my family of origin, like you mentioned, Daisy, and try to change some of the patterns. It's, as you talked about, Todd, it's meant using my 2 ears and 1 mouth to listen way more than I speak. I have all kinds of good ideas, I think, so listening has been a really important practice for me. Understanding trauma and how it shapes us so that we can learn, heal, and try to break some colonial cycles of perfectionism. You mentioned you're a recovering perfectionist, Daisy. You resonate with that. Power hoarding, extractionism, reductionism, all those things that uphold hurtful patterns. And I also know when I first heard the term white supremacy culture, that was triggering for me. And it is for many, I think. And after I got over my reaction to that, I realized it was a term to illuminate the many ways that white colonial culture has shaped how I and many others in the world see the world, what laws we live by, what norms we follow. And I actually started to find understanding white supremacy culture hugely liberating, because some of the ways I had been seeing the world were not just the way the world is, but instead they were part of a colonial lens. And that means that I have choice. I don't have to be driven by perfectionism and defensiveness and either or thinking. And so as a white person with many privileges, it's been really liberating to know that there is another way that brings us into belonging and connection instead of othering and division. Another powerful tool of allyship is naming racism in our cultures and institutions and in ourselves and in myself. One of the most freeing things for me has been to no longer be afraid to recognize that I was raised in a racist society. So I have racist biases, and knowing that makes me safer and less likely to hurt people than when I used to believe I was colorblind or without bias. We make meaning and we can have empathic relationships or experiences through relationships and through the arts. So it has been very impactful for me to read Indigenous authors, watch films made by Indigenous filmmakers. And part of that is because we need to recognize that it's not up to Indigenous peoples to educate me. I need to do my own work so that when I do speak with Indigenous colleagues or patients or friends, I'm asking questions based on learning that I've engaged in and not asking them to teach me the basics of history and ongoing colonial policies. They are busy reclaiming their languages and building their families and communities, and they don't need to spend their time doing my work for me. So I think at the end of this, a resource list will come out to you. And so in that, I've included a list of some of the art and literature and research and publications and legislation that have helped me on my journey of listening, learning, unlearning, healing, disrupting, questioning, in case some of them are helpful for you. And finally, from the teachings of Sean and Heather Atleo and the Atleo Center for Compassionate Leadership, I do think that this work also needs to be done with as much compassion as I can muster for myself and others, because as I said before, I do think othering is a great threat that we're all facing, and because I think belonging is the answer. And so I thank you for being here tonight, and happy to engage any time in conversation or receive feedback, and look forward to a conversation later on tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Hubler. Yeah, really amazing words, and really love even changing your speech a little bit, like in real time, listening to some of the Dr. Daisy and the presentations. So we'll keep going here now. So Dr. John Polovich is the virtual health lead for RCCBC, as well as the UBC CPD chair and the medical director for Garrison County Family Services. So my boss, actually. So without further ado, let's get him going.
Thanks, Todd. And good evening, everybody. Really nice to see everybody. I'm just gonna share my screen here, if that's okay. I came with a few slides. Not as an excuse, but I came on short notice. So my name's John Polovich, and I'm calling in tonight from the Stolo Nation. I'm about an hour upriver from headquarters of UBC CPD in Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam territory, and just want to echo a lot of the great speakers that come before me. And Victor, thank you for opening us up so well. I guess I'm going to share my story, and I hope it comes across okay. And I apologize, I'm just coming down from a nasty cold, so I sound a bit like Kermit the Frog. So I showed you this picture here in the front because it's super meaningful to me. This is the Stellatan First Nation Health Center, and it's a wellness center. And for people who don't know where Stellatan is, it's about 165 kilometers to the west of Prince George. It's on Highway 16, unfortunately also known as the Highway of Tears. And I've been going there for 27 years now, and I'm on my 27th year. And so it has a lot of meaning to me personally, but also professionally. And so my story is I was born in a little community in northern Alberta in Treaty 8 territory. The community was known as Spirit River. My father was a country doctor, and my mom a school teacher, and from Eastern European descent. And I didn't know anything about anything that I'm talking about or sharing tonight. I just want to be really honest. I come with a lot of humility when I speak about this work. It's predicated on a lot of interactions and conversations and experience, and working with tremendous people over many years. So that's my land acknowledgement. So the territory which we support, and Todd alluded to, I'm medical director for Garrison County Family Services. So that started a long time ago, and the area that we help support, kind of in the belly button of our province, is a massive geographical area, and a lot of the communities within the territory historically were really invisible to most people. Although the territory was always there for millennia, it wasn't kind of documented. It wasn't part of my teaching in grade school, but also in university. And I graduated back in 1994. If you asked me then, or told me then that I would be doing the kind of work I'm doing today, I truthfully wouldn't have believed you. And so I guess that's really what I want to share, is that I've tried to grow myself along this in my professional career, but it wasn't always like that. And so for me, I'd be dishonest insane. It's been a lifelong journey. And perhaps it has been lifelong, but I didn't recognize it in a conscious level, and that may be a fair comment. But somewhere along the way, and I like to credit one of my preceptors, Jerry McFetridge in Quesnel, back in the 90s when I started my residency in Quesnel in family practice there. Jerry did outreach work to some of the carrier communities, and I think that's where the seed got planted for me. And my wife, who's also a family doctor, we stayed in Quesnel for 2 years, and then we moved on to Fraser Lake, and that's where I started my work with Carriers Canyon Family Services. So I share this picture is because one of the underlying principles that were shared at the beginning is around the element of time and trust. And so if I had to kind of package up for me, what to share with, what I share with learners and with colleagues, people who are interested to come with me to the communities that I help support, is that earning trust takes time, and it takes the time of communities, not my time and not your time. And that time is decided upon by the people we're trying to serve. And I always tell the story. I'll share the story in a very anonymous way. But Irene, who's on the right hand side here, this is Irene Williams, and she's this beautiful human being who's carrier herself, and her co-worker is Violet on the left, and the gentleman in the middle is Peter O'Mara, who's an Indigenous family physician from Australia, who we were up in a community this past winter. And the story I'm going to share kind of epitomizes what I share with learners about how invested one has to think about time. And so Irene, when I first started going to this particular community, I would go once a month and I would see patients. At the end of the day, Irene would come to me and say, "Do you think you could come and make a house call on Joe?" And I said, "Sure, no problem." And Joe's an elder who lived by himself on the edge of town. And so I would go with Irene as kind of my ambassador to go see Joe. And we would tend to Joe's needs. And then the next month I would come back, and at the end of the day, I'd go with Irene. And so it went. But the only way to get the way Joe would, Joe didn't like people, certainly outside his community, coming to his home. But Irene was a trusted, familiar face and voice. And so I was with Irene, and it was fine. Then one day Irene stopped coming because she her work took her onto something else. And so I didn't have Irene working with me in this community. And so I had some residents, a resident with me, a medical student, and say, "Oh, we have to go see Joe at the end of the day." And I'd go and knock on Joe's door, and Joe would peep out the window. Nothing. Nobody opened the door. So, okay. So I left, and we carried on our way to the next community. And next month I went again. Same thing repeated itself. Joe would look out the window. No, the door wasn't opening. It took me over 2 years of going every month to Joe's house and knocking on his door. And then one day Joe opened the door, and in we went. And from that day forward, Joe always opened the door when I came in the clinic. So my message was that it took a tremendous amount of time, far more than I ever imagined, to earn the trust of Joe. So much of what I do and what I share, and Daisy and Todd and others who, Todd was a resident who came with me, Terry Aldred was also a resident. Many have engaged, and I like to think that the things we do in the community that is outside the health center are probably the most important things we do in establishing our connections with the community members themselves. And so these are just pictures of different community engagement exercises, playing basketball, being with the kids, that kind of thing. That this is where trust is really developed and nurtured. And again, this is over many years. I've mentioned that I bring learners with me. This is Elder Julie Jacques on the right-hand picture. That's her late husband, Al. And this is her daughter on the left, Nancy. This is in Takla Landing. And the young face on the right in the red jacket is Dr. Marie-Pierre Dulay, who was a general internal medicine resident when I took her to Takla Landing. And so part of the work we do is understanding the culture, but also understanding what there is to learn through elders in the community and community members themselves. And so this is as much as an education as anything, and certainly has been pivotal in how our relationships and trust has evolved over time. And I can't underscore how powerful this has been. And I know Todd, who lives now kind of half time in Takla. I think he would agree that the experiences in the community are really underpin how close as healthcare providers we become with our community members. Last picture I'm going to share. These again more community-based pictures. That's Mary Michelle on the left in Fort Babine coming to the smokehouse. It's really, this is again part of the work to be done. But I also want to share that part of our role as people from privilege, myself, and power. This is a picture on the right of Dermot Kelleher, our current Dean of Medicine of UBC, and this is his wife Jean. And this is in Elder Julie's kitchen, and Alvin, her late husband. And I thought it was important. This is during Dr. Kelleher's first term as dean, and so he came and traveled with me and Jean to Takla Landing. We also came to Stellatin and Yukuche. But and we're sitting here having breakfast at Julie's kitchen table. But this was really important to bring the Dean of Medicine to communities, most importantly to understand the kind of work that we're aspiring to do. These are medical students at the time, Chelsea and Privia, who are here, Dave Snadden, who was the first founding dean of the Northern Medical Program. This is really important to understand and advocate for resources to help communities like Takla to really empower them, but also to progress healthcare delivery in their communities. And lastly, this is the Northern Medical Program entering class that comes annually out to Stellatin. And this is a really powerful way to expose them in their first week to the community of Stellatin, and the community has really embraced it. And the picture on the left was again predicated on trust. Chief John Allen French asked me, I remember very clearly, it was I think it was either Christmas Eve or Boxing Day, that I needed to come to Takla because the vaccine was arriving for COVID, and we were delivering it on December the 29th in 2020. And so this is us landing in some nurses and some community members bringing the very first COVID vaccine to Takla Landing. So I'm going to stop there. And the resources that people have shared are tremendous. I don't have really anything to add. I'm a big fan of experiential learning, that is coming to communities and learning from community members themselves. And I know that's not always possible for everybody, but where it is, I really would encourage people in the audience today to go with trusted people to communities and community members, and go with a lot of openness, and you'll just have a wonderful time. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. John. Really appreciate your words. And I have a funny story. Like, so when I'm a first brand new grad going to go to clinic, so we're going to Yukuche, and so you're Indigenous doc. You're like, okay, provide some good culturally safe care. I'm going out to their community, and I think like 2 people showed up the first time I went there, and probably like 3 people the next time. And Dr. John went there like the week or two after and before, and he had like 30 plus patients in there. And it really took time to actually build those relationships where people started to come in to see myself, and it started getting busier. And I think that time that he was talking, that experiential learning, doing the community activities really do have a big impact. So really thank you for your presentation. The next panelist is Dr. Marilyn Thorpe. She is a psychiatrist with 10 Indigenous communities in the remote North, as well as the psychiatrist and psychiatry lead at the FNHA Virtual Clinic SUPS and the Virtual Clinic Medical Director.
Thanks, Todd. Before I start, I think everyone should know there was a meeting a month ago where we, the speakers, gathered to discuss this. And the speakers all said, I'm not worthy of being considered an ally. I was very struck by that at the time, and I'm struck listening how learned my colleagues are. Good evening. I'm Marilyn Thorpe. I gratefully live on the lands of the Coast Salish, Lekwungen, and Songhees nations known as Victoria. My ancestors were European settlers, and I spent most of my first 50 years on the ancestral lands of the Thames, Oneida, Delaware, and Munsee nations in London, Ontario. I was really driven by huge gaps in service, and I became an adolescent psychiatrist. For 22 years, I did private practice psychotherapy. Most of my patients had survived significant abuse, parental substance use, parental absence, multiple moves in schools, poverty, and foster care. I saw many immigrants who had witnessed atrocities. I spent a lot of time understanding trauma and what helps us survive. I also learned about my patients' cultures and what was important to their families and communities. In 2013, I left private practice in London and moved to Victoria into public practice. I took great offense to the repeated new catchphrases I heard that we should be culturally safe, culturally sensitive, and trauma-informed. That's what psychiatry and psychotherapy are all about. I took 2 jobs here, one at the University of Victoria and one at Youth Forensics. Arriving in BC, I immediately noticed that 6% of the population is Indigenous. I was struck that over half of my forensic patients were Indigenous and hardly any at UVic. My very first patient in British Columbia was at Youth Forensics, and he was a 16-year-old Indigenous boy. His mom had driven him from the northern tip of the island to see me in Victoria, wanting him seen as soon as I got there the first day. He had spent 2 years collecting feathers and rocks, talking to owls, and building a shrine in his bedroom. His mother hadn't been able to get him to a psychiatrist and was ridiculed for not respecting her Indigenous spirituality. The son finally attacked her for dusting his shrine, and she charged him, hoping to get psychiatric help. He had spent 2 whole weeks in the local jail, naked, defecating, squatting on the floor, being a bird, before it occurred to someone that maybe he was mentally ill. He then spent 9 months in Bernery's forensic psych unit getting treated for his schizophrenia. Now he had returned to the island, and they came to me for follow-up. The interview with him was short, but Mom stayed to tell me their very tragic life story. She was terrified that I would get rid of him. She drove him for 7 months before she trusted me enough to do virtual sessions. When I went home that first night, I cried. At UVic, within 5 months, I was the lead on a special services committee project to create a mental health program there. Already I had seen an Indigenous patient far away from home, struggling immensely with being lonely, having no friends, feeling like he didn't fit in, and in need of community if he was going to stay in school. We made 3 appointments at First People's House on campus to share our grant money, and 3 times while we sat in the waiting room, they stood us up. In those 4 years at UVic, one of the things we developed with our grant was collaborative psychiatry pit race appointments, where the psychiatrist visited the family doctor and patient to help solve problems that didn't need a full consultation. SSC then tasked me with spread, and I went to speak in Prince George. Afterwards, a secretary toured me around, and I asked her, "So this land thing they keep saying at lectures, is it a fad or is it a thing you do in BC?" Wow, did she set me straight. She told me about her grandfather's experiences in residential school. I asked her a million questions, and she taught me a lot. On our way to the airport, she stopped at a store and left me in the truck. She returned and gave me a pair of earrings that were of orcas. I wanted to show them to you tonight, but I put them away when I got home the last time I gave a talk. It's such an important place, I can't find them. This is what it is to be old. She told me that an orca is a leader, and she hoped I would be a leader in psychiatry for her people. The next week, still pretty miffed about the land acknowledgement, I was yapping about it at our neighborhood Christmas party. My younger neighbor, David, listened and finally blurted out, "Marilyn, the reason they're upset is that no one paid for the land." Of course they did. No. We stole the land? Yes. I will guess that everyone here tonight has grappled with that new knowledge of the crimes done when self-righteous Europeans invaded this land and forced their way of life on the Indigenous. We don't know what we don't know, and there's a lot we don't know. For me, always the biggest missing pieces with patients are the things they're ashamed of, whether or not it's their fault, and what is obvious to them, and so they imagine it to me, like the sky is blue. One of the things I have learned I was least aware of was life on reserve. But back to spreading pit appointments. They were hard to spread because 2 physicians could not bill MSP to see a patient at the same time. We'd been able to do it at UVic because they were on session. In May 2019, I was approached by Erin Tedesco from First Nations Health Authority. She explained that when the authority was created in 2013, a survey of the communities identified 3 priority needs: family doctors, psychiatry, and substance use. First Nations was getting internet into remote communities, and they were pairing communities with family doctors on sessional pay. They wondered if they could pair psychiatrists, and wondered if I was willing to pilot psychiatry and pit appointments to remote communities. I agreed to be the virtual psychiatrist to 2 physicians in 2 communities. And now that you've met John Polovich, you will not be surprised that what I had actually agreed to do was provide services to 11 communities and 10 family doctors. I was very scared as I began. What on earth did I know about being Indigenous and living in the remote North? Why would anyone trust and talk to the descendant of white settlers? My first patient was a 60-year-old articulate substance use worker in his own village. He had never told his story before, and he described the pain of being literally torn out of his mother's arms at 5, of residential school, of being unable to fit in with his family on the summers he returned, and of his journey since then. Over that year, I listened to 60 patient stories. I learned a ton, and my patients and family doctors found me helpful. Unbeknownst to me, during that year, COVID had begun, and I knew that part. What I didn't know was 2 weeks into COVID, First Nations had set up the virtual Doctor of the Day clinic for all Indigenous people and their families in BC. In July, at the end of our pilot, Aaron called to propose that we use the lessons learned and start a Monday to Friday psychiatry service and a substance use service at the clinic. It makes me sad that psychiatry quickly became a consult-only service. Over time, I became the psychiatry lead, and in June of this year, the clinic director. I continue to spend an average of 10 hours a week with the people in my communities, those original ones. As of today, I counted today, as of today, I have heard the stories of 768 patients. Since that Christmas party, David and I have only had occasion to say hi, until 2 weeks ago, when I wanted permission to tell you our story. It occurred to me that he had no idea what I had been doing since he first set me straight years ago. He tells me that he worried for weeks that he had been rude and spoken out of turn. I am here tonight because David and a young secretary were brave enough to be allies. In 2020, at my first FNHA team meeting, our elder prayed, thanking the Creator for bringing these knowledge carriers to her people. She asked that we be given wisdom and strength. I was deeply touched that she would trust the descendants of settlers to help her people. Learning to be a knowledge carrier feels like a sacred calling, and we, as physicians, have the opportunity to participate very meaningfully in the recovery of our Indigenous neighbors. It's scary because we don't know what we don't know, and we will make mistakes. It's the hardest work of my career, but it is also the most rewarding. I encourage you to pursue your own allyship journey. Thanks.
Wow, that's really something. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Thorpe. It's always a pleasure getting to work with you and some really great works. I have my co-moderator here now, Grace Kelly. She's a liaison of the Indigenous-Specific Anti-Racism and Cultural Safety with the Doctors BC. Spent many years working in health and education, supporting Indigenous communities and health practitioners alike. Gracie enjoys sharing gifts of her Stolo culture through workshops, webinars, and cultural teachings. And so that would give her some time here to really talk about allyship and what that means for her. So with any further ado, here's Gracie.
Thank you. Kwasai, thank you, Victor, and thank you, panelists, for sharing your allyship journey. I'm grateful to share my First Nations perspectives on behalf of the UBC CPD team. I've learned over years on how important the words or having a good relationship is. I think of that opportunities of between a physician and a patient, the words of having a meaningful relationship, once again, is so important. When I've been in community, whether it might be in education or in health, I've had some great conversations with some First Nations, sharing their experiences on how grateful they are for their family doctor, as the relationship offers trust and mutual respect for the quality of time that they have together. As a patient, I offer gratitude to my physician for completing my appointment with words of, "Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss at this time?" Those last few seconds left with me with the humility that I was taken care of. I wanted to acknowledge this evening my wise and wonderful sister, Dr. Joanne Archibald, xʷməthkվəy. She has shared the importance of the words of listening. Some say we should listen with our three hearts, two on the side of our head and one with our heart. Listening skills have been developed from a young age for our families, our communities, our nations. It's part of our lifelong learning journey. We listen with respect to honor the elders and knowledge keepers for sharing their gifts with us at that time. This evening, I began with some mindfulness breaths and committed to listening with an open heart and energy. So I offer that gratitude today for what has been shared. Just a quick note in response to the words as well of allyship. And I wanted to acknowledge the beautiful people who are upstanding their work, the Indigenous health professionals like Dr. Todd, Alec, and Dr. Terry Eldred, and those many more physician leads who are out there supporting our communities. I also wanted to acknowledge the Indigenous health leads who support the health authorities and their communities, including as well Indigenous managers, liaisons, cultural mentors, and those that are there and are available and have committed to our health and wellness journey. As mentioned, there are 2 upcoming learning sessions. People can register and find out on the JCC Collaborate on Health website on the events page. So thank you everybody for these humble words. I'm just grateful to be here at this time. I'll return it back to you, Dr. Alec.
Thank you so much. And yeah, some really great perspective, and appreciate you the advertising for the future event. So it's just a little after 7 now. So I thank our speakers for their wonderful presentation. We're going to move on to our question and answer for the remainder of our time. As a reminder, we're using slido.com to receive your questions. Please go to slido.com and enter the event code Allyship, ALLYSHIP. Please have out questions suggested by others to increase the chances of being them answered. And we'll ask that all the presenters please turn on your camera, and we'll read out some of these questions. So I'm going to Slido, and here's a question that was upvoted the most. Dr. Hubler introduced her family relations as part of her introduction. Someone shared with me that this can be a valuable practice for cultural safety. I'm estranged from my parents, and my sibling is chosen family. How would I introduce myself with this in mind? Thank you. And there was a couple of replies that said, I would encourage you to consider your relationship with your ancestral lineage beyond your parents. Perhaps you can reflect on this in a broader sense. Also, a family built through adoption. I think chosen family is absolutely family and part of who you are. Positionality statements are a great tool. You can Google lots of great resources of how to use them effectively. It's more about being transparent about your position of privilege, bias that you speak from, and less from detailing every specific ethnic history in your family tree. But I don't know if Dr. Hubler would like to make any comments about this.
I think that answer is a brilliant one. I think I used to not do that because I thought I was supposed to be invisible. It wasn't about me as a physician, it was about the patient. And then through relationships with Indigenous folks who were like, so who are your people? And, I had a very shallow answer. Well, they're mixed Northern European. I don't really know. And it was actually through relationships with Indigenous people that I actually came to know what my real story is. And that they're asking for, it's for relationality. So I think if you don't actually know, saying I don't actually know, because here's my story of rupture, because that's the shared story of colonization. And that can be a really connecting place to be. So I think the answer that was put into the chat was a wonderful one.
Okay, so next one I see is what is the best way to communicate with colleagues who are making statements that are culturally unsafe and sensitive? So feel free to jump in, anyone.
I'm happy to take a stab at it, and I would love others to. Was there anybody else who was about to hit the unmute button? I think just being honest about, I used to have those questions and thoughts too. And here's some of the things that I said, and then here's what I've learned, and then here's how that's improved everything. Here's how it's improved my relationship. But I think not othering anybody. We got to come alongside all of us, and we're all at different stages. And so I think just being really empathic, like Dr. John, you modeled that. Like that's not how I came to this work. Here's and here's how I got to this place, and I see you and I hear you, and you're not alone. I think we can't other, we know that if we do that, we can actually leave people more racist, which makes them more likely to be harmful.
Yeah, Todd, just build on Dana's good words. I think when possible, again, that offering an experience for people to come often does so much more than any words can do. And I've had more than one colleague who thought a particular way, who at the end of a week traveling to communities, bravely and openly admitted that they get it now. And so there are a lot of biases and outright racist things that are shared, and often from a place of ignorance, and I say that respectfully, not understanding where people are at all. And it's really interesting. I was in communities last week, and I had two specialists with me, not Dr. Marilyn and or Dr. Daisy, but one of the specialists made this really cool, interesting, and she had this revelation, seeing the same patient. She saw the same patient in their home community, but she had also experienced seeing them in her office in Prince George, and how incredibly different the experience was for both her and the patient, and how incredibly relaxed and at ease and calm the patient seemed to be in their own environment. And so a lot of these misconceptions can be assisted with going with providers who have relationships and have built trust and forged that connection with communities over time.
Dad was just here a couple weeks ago, and he's slowly coming on board. He's 89, so he was making some yappy remark about we give these people education. So I said, post-secondary education. So I said, okay, Dad. Hardly anybody's at university, and I gave him about the sentence I gave you guys about the kid that I'd seen there, and I said, and when I was up north, most of those people on those reserves have never been off the reserve. They don't have a driver's license because they can't get one, and they're not allowed to leave the reserve because the RCMP are waiting. They have never been to a store. They have never applied for a job. All these things that we all know how to do, they haven't done. It's not a crosswalk. They haven't seen a stoplight. How on earth are they, even if we give them free education? I think it's a good government scam, because if we give them something they can't use, if they come to one of these cities and they don't have anyone around and no one's helping them at all, and they're all by themselves away from their family, how is that a gift? And he ended up saying, Marilyn, you're gonna have to live to be 200, because you got to start that too. But I asked the people who are listening to think about what we're doing at the universities for those kids. It's very hard to leave reserve and come to get an education. And I think once you explain to people what they're actually up against, because it's easy to say something when you don't know what you're talking about.
I think also when we hear from our patients when they've experienced racism in the healthcare system, it's also, what do I do then? So I'm going to tell a quick story. I saw a man who hadn't seen a doctor in about 15 years, and he'd been struggling with weight loss and worsening abdominal pain over the course of a couple of years. And finally, someone said, you should see these doctors from FNHA. And he said, oh, I'll give him a shot, but I don't have much faith. And he's super, super sick man, and got him in with a specialist on a fairly urgent basis for endoscopy. And we walked him through what the prep would look like. He got to the hospital, got in the gown, sitting in the waiting room, and he got bumped, and he got bumped, and he bumped, and he hadn't been eating, and 6 hours, and finally he had the courage to go up and ask the booking clerk, like, I've been waiting here for 6 hours, I'm pretty hungry. And she said, yeah, there's a lot of people who are pretty hungry, and there's a lot of people who are don't want to be here. And he's like, but I've been waiting, like, how long later? And she said, you're free to go, this is not a prison. And he turned around and he put on his clothes and he left, and he got sicker and sicker. And I think the biggest thing is to believe him, and then to get permission, and then I called back to that booking clerk, and I didn't shame her. I didn't, because I actually want to come alongside her and say, I've got permission to tell you, here's how many of his members of his family came to this hospital and never left alive. Here's the things that happened in this hospital. The courage that it took for him to come, and he's super sick. And she's like, oh, okay, I'll call the surgeon and see if we can rebook. And I called the surgeon's MOA, and you need to go the extra mile, right? I think that's the other thing, is believe people, go the extra mile. And then you can get an Indigenous liaison to meet them at the door, which is a harm reduction. Like, Indigenous liaisons, they're human shields in a system that's not safe. It's a harm reduction method, and until the system's safe, we do need to, so be kind to the Indigenous liaisons too, because they're doing really, really hard work, but they are a good harm reduction strategy.
And Dr. John.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I've got, and I'm sure other people on this call tonight have patients who have experienced overt racism to the point where in the neighboring community, there was a time in their life they couldn't go to a restaurant in that community. Or if they went to the movie theater, they had to sit in a particular corner of the movie theater. Like that this isn't like generations ago. This is like this patient experienced that. And I mean, they're now an elder. That was those kinds of stories. Well, number one, they're really hard to hear, but they're really important to hear. They evoke a certain response. Yeah, there's almost disbelief that something like that could occur in our own country, but it has, and it kind of still does. The other part I would just draw out is that over the years, I think allyship I would suggest also applies to ourselves as healthcare providers, helping one another, and I've seen some of my colleagues, my Indigenous colleagues, who've had to really struggle and face humiliation and just racist stuff where one does have to step in, and I think that's really important to understand that, and what's our role in caring for those people and supporting those people, and just saying it's not okay to do that.
No, thank you, Dr. John. I see the next uptick here is the current patient complaint process is in reporting experience of racism in the healthcare system is not working. What needs to be done to improve the system, ensuring individuals feel safe navigating and participating in the feedback cycle? What actionable system level change should be done? Yeah.
I can start it, and I'm just been thinking about that question, and being a former director of patient safety and quality, we saw this, and it is really hard because we want, one of the things that I struggled with is like, and rightly so, is like, why do we have mandatory modules on hand washing, but it's not mandatory around Sanyas training? And that's like, I couldn't answer that question by one of the Indigenous liaisons that we had a review during that time, and I didn't have a good answer. And I was embarrassed to say that because I can't force somebody to do this, but at the same time, this is what our college asks us every year, but there isn't any other ways to call in, because like when we're pushing people, there's more resistance. It's like the law of physics, right? And so we want to call in to say, hey, this didn't land well. And doing it in a, what I'm learning still is how to do this in the calling in as opposed to the calling out. And I think I still get I get triggered too. So I need to learn how to, when I'm ready to have these conversations, how to do it so that the other person is also willing to have a conversation about it, and helping them with the resources, what steps, and asking them, potentially what steps would they be willing to make and how I can help them. And just trying to go back. And I think I'm still in my early journeys of understanding restorative justice, but that's the other piece of what we're learning through patient safety is how to do this. But one of the challenges is organizational risk and, the legal pieces, medical legal, which is still the structural racism that can still exist in that realm. So navigating these pieces is going to take time. We're learning from our New Zealand neighbors of how to do this. I think also Australia. I'm still, as I said, learning from this. And I saw Dana was unmuting at the same time, so I'll turn it to Dana.
Yeah, I would just point to some people who have real expertise in this. Mark Matthew from Health Quality BC, Dr. Terry Aldred from FNHA, who have a lot of great ideas and a lot of great research about how to make the complaints process safer. I think what FNHA has done is they actually create an opportunity where they seek feedback from every single encounter, which actually tells people we actually want to know, and what they tell their story in the way they want to tell it to someone that they feel safe with, which is an Indigenous person. So I think we have to make sure that it feels like a safe, that we're soliciting it, that we tell them exactly what we're going to do with that feedback, that they co-create what's going to happen with that feedback. And there is, it's a complex thing. Restorative justice is one method, and then there's some controversy about that in this space, because we're restoring to what? If the desire, if it was a harmful space that to begin with, what do we want to restore? Is there anything that is desirable to restore back to, or do we actually have to do something else? So it's a complex system, but I would look to Mark Matthew at Health Quality BC, Dr. Terry Aldred, as real experts in that area.
If I can interject a couple comments, particularly for Dr. Daisy talking about some training, and I think the Docs of BC, including Gracie Kelly, is here as a staff here, and Dr. Terry Aldred and myself and other people that are doing some ISAR work, trying to find some barriers to increase the amount of education. There's a lot of standards that are including the college, the Docs of BC, all the health authorities, but we're just trying to figure out ways to make low barrier processes to improve education, because it's technically not a requirement. There is some data on there, and I think the only we really do have is the SANIAs and the 23-24 that are done through the college, showing about 6,000 of the 17,000 registrants have taken one of these courses. Doesn't include anything else. But I think there's a big need to do that. In regards to the complaint process, there is formal processes through the college, but then also through the health authorities, depending if they're employee for the health authorities. So I only really know from the north that we have a really great Indigenous, we have the Northern Health Indigenous health team, and there's a patient experience team, which really talks about racial complaints. And so they'll have a complaint from their process, and they review what happened, and then have some feedback mechanisms. And I think there's like that in most health authorities, but I would apologize. I don't know all the different processes, but hopefully there are some processes that can give some recommendations at the end for the provider, but also to the patient to try to close that loop, and they do try to work on like that. So, obviously there's it's too bad that we need to have something like that, but I think we do need to work on some of those processes to ensure that we do good care for Indigenous patients. If there's no more comments, maybe I'll go to the next one here. Maybe this one: how to talk with busy, stressed white colleagues about racism when they don't understand what white fragility is. They're unaware of their personal barriers in addressing racism. And it looks like there's a calling in course online. So there's been a lot of comments about that. So it seems like there's been a lot of, so I think they put in a join the calling in movement link that was put on there.
Yeah, it's that is a tough one. When people are stressed, that's when their biases go up. And I would turn to Marilyn's expertise on this one, but from my understanding, and I'm trying to give them, the grace of understanding that they're stressed, but also, when there is an opportunity, when that heightened stress is down, to have a one-on-one and just ask, again, calling in approach that was, the resource that was mentioned. Loretta Ross is an incredible speaker, and she talks about her experience of wanting to call out, but from her own personal traumatic experiences, she was able to learn how to call in the perpetrators of the traumas, not specifically to her trauma, but to others who have had similar fates. And that was just eye-opening for me to understand. And I still struggle to have these conversations, to be honest. It's again, asking them, I'm wondering how if like just asking them from a space of curiosity, what's happening, what happened to you, to learning what kind of backstory is there that made them think that way. So it's a lot to learn for me, and I don't think I have a good answer for you. I apologize, but just wanted to share.
Maybe you would just add, so Harley Eagle, that some of you may have had a chance, he's an Indigenous cultural safety consultant. The way he often calls people in is he talks about his being a man in an inherently sexist society, and that he doesn't pretend like he doesn't have sexism, as you talked about too, Todd. He says, yeah, I was raised in this, I was bathed in this sexist society. And so here's how I try to stay safe. Here's how I try to recognize my biases. Here's how I try to stay open to feedback from my female colleagues and friends and family members. And I don't pretend that I don't have sexist biases. And I think similarly, we can do that with each other, is say, yeah, like, we've all are part of this older story of colonization. There isn't really anybody who hasn't been impacted by the disconnection of colonization. And so I try to see the hurt, as you said, Daisy, behind. I try to talk about that older story of colonization. I talk about functional MRI studies that show when we're tired and hungry, we just are more racist. We just are. And so how are we taking care of ourselves so that we're being as safe as we can, instead of pretending that we don't have that risk when we're tired and hungry?
Thank you. I think a lot of these questions here, so maybe I might just go down to one more with the 3 thumbs up. We're actually right at time, but they did give us permission for another 5 or 10 minutes. So just to put a couple here, if everyone's okay, if you have to leave, please feel free. But I do see a question here about I'm trying to learn our local Coast Salish language. Some clients think this is amusing. I want to do this in a respectful manner. Am I on the correct path to allyship with this work? So I think it would be an ally or a non-Indigenous person that's trying to do that too.
Todd, I can give a non-evidence-based reply, if that's okay. But I mean, I as a non-Indigenous healthcare provider, I've learned little bits of carrier for almost 3 decades, and it's been really great, and I get laughed at and laughed with a lot, and I enjoy it. And yeah, it's been a really great journey, and people take a lot of time to even print out stuff and put stuff on the walls. And yeah, I think it's great. I think learning the language, certainly for myself, and I share some of the carrier phrases and words with learners who come as well. I personally have never had a bad experience from, and it's not that I sought it out. It's just that people kind of offered it, and I took the offer up. So I think that's the truth of the matter. So I found that all the communities I go to, there are certain individuals, certainly in my experience, who are kind of the community leaders, cultural leaders, in sharing. They either teach in if there's a school in the community, they'll often teach carrier at the school or in the community or at other different events. So surrounding yourself with those kinds of people has been a really positive experience.
Okay, thank you. And just want to be cognizant that we do see all the comments, and so we will try to bring it for future events. And maybe there definitely seem to be some themes, so we can try to hopefully in the next coming webinars by UBC CPD can help address and be specific to these questions. Maybe the last one. Sometimes I hear land acknowledged rattle off super speedily with jarring mispronunciations. Not today. Feels disrespectful. Is it better off to admit the land acknowledged it? Is giving feedback okay, or better just to know a certain presenter doesn't care, or not teach them how to pretend to care when they don't? Looks like sorry, I think Victor Guerin actually had a response here. Sorry, I apologize. Trying to look at Slido and also Zoom here at the same time, so I apologize for my moderating skills here. It says Victor Guerin actually put here, when you ask how to improve the complaints process, it puts me in mind of something I say to people when I see them press the closed door button on an elevator. I tell them about the elevator at Oak Ridge Mall. If you press the closed door button there, it takes 4 seconds for the door to close. If you don't press the button, it takes 4 seconds for the door to close. So it's just a pacifier. That's the assurance that we need for the complaints process, that something will be done to address complaints and that this is not just a pacifier. He's also a language teacher at SFU. So if you wanted to talk anything about that process, about some of our colleagues that are non-Indigenous taking a language specific course for their area, what do you think about that, Victor, if you're still here?
Yeah, as you probably know, language is ultra important to our people, and some people do get offended when someone tries to speak our language and as you said, mispronounce things. But personally, I think making an effort is a significant thing. Personally, I've been working on speaking my language for some 40 years now. I'm someone that didn't grow up speaking our language. I had started intensively learning to speak our language at 20 years old. And so I understand it's not easy for someone to try to speak our language on very short notice. So to me, it's although it can grate on the nerves to hear someone mispronouncing our language, at least they're making the effort, and that's important to me. People will improve over time, and I always say to my students to jump in and try speaking the language while you're in my courses, because making mistakes is just as big a part of the learning process as successes are, and so making the effort is the important part of things, because we learn as we do things more. We learn better how to accomplish things.
Just wondering if we address the person who was talking about the rapid mutilation of a land acknowledgement. I think some of the words are very hard. The rapidity could be slowed down and said with respect, right? And maybe calling in someone privately and saying that you think if they slowed it down, it would sound more sincere. Because they may just be rushing through for the next thing, but if you explain to them how it sounds,
yes,
and
absolutely.
you're sure they don't want to sound that way.
Exactly, and also slowing it down also helps people to pronounce properly. Even in English, with esoteric language, people tend to try and speed it up too much to get through it, but they wind up mispronouncing when they do that. So yeah, slowing things down is helpful for learning to speak language. So it's just like the saying about learning to crawl before you learn to walk, and learning to walk before you learn to run, right?
Thank you so much for those comments. And I think it's even a learning process. Like if seen the last 5 years, there's been a really big uptake about land acknowledgements and having those protocols. A person, one of the elders said, well, it's the law to acknowledge the traditional territory you're working on, and that's a law. So we end question. So we do it, and I think we need to work on the process and have a little bit of time for people on the journey how to pronunciate, some of the words, because some of them are difficult to see, especially if you're traveling to a different area. But learning even the process to have an elder in the space, and look how much education resource, like they have so much knowledge and expertise, and also start us off in a good way, because a lot of the times these conversations can be quite challenging. So thank you again, Victor. I really am super appreciative of these great people. I really highly put them up. Do some incredible work with Dr. Thorpe, Dr. Hubler, Dr. Dulay, Dr. Polovich, and Gracie, Kelly, so doing some amazing work. So really appreciate you spending your evening with us. I think this is part of the process and the journey for allyship. And I just have one quick simple request for everyone. And one of my colleagues, a physician ally, non-Indigenous, would say, we are the system. And so therefore, there will be no change unless we do any individual action in our personal life, but also in our professional life. So we'd all ask everyone to reflect on your personal commitment to your journey towards allyship. I think Dr. Thorpe here, our psychiatry colleague here, would really see that CBT thing where you have to have that commitment to really change your behaviors, to change your thoughts. So I think we can have an internal commitment to do that, and you can feel free to put it in the evaluation process of things that you want to do. Or on the Slido, but before we leave, I'd like to put maybe the next slide here for the next coming event here, so that people can please continue attending these webinars. So the next one is creating a safe space for Indigenous patients in primary care on June 18th, 2025 at 6 to 7:30 p.m. Thank you so much again, and I hope everyone has a lovely night.